My name is Lauren. I am 31 years old. I believed love was about care, patience, and giving. I thought if I gave my time, my heart, and my trust, the other person would do the same. But that is not always true. Some people take your love and give you silence in return. I met Ryan at a small party. I didn't want to go, but a friend asked me, so I went. Ryan was quiet. He stood near the kitchen, holding a drink and looking at nothing in particular. He wasn't like the others. He didn't try to talk a lot or show off. When I stood next to him, he looked at me and asked, "Do you also hate parties?" I laughed and said, "Yes." That was how it started. We spoke for 20 minutes. He asked what I did. I told him I worked at a clothing store. He said he worked at a car garage. He fixed cars and liked working alone. I liked that about him. He didn't talk too much, but when he did, he listened. After that day, we sent messages. Then we started meeting on weekends. We walked around the lake. We ate simple food from food trucks. We didn't do anything big, but I liked the time with him. He didn't try to impress me. He said he liked simple things. I said I did too. After 8 months, he asked me to move in with him. "I don't have much," he said, "but I want you near me." I was touched. I moved into his small flat. It wasn't fancy, but I was happy. I thought we were building a life together. At first, things were okay. He wasn't a man who gave flowers or said sweet words, but he was there. We ate dinner together. He asked how my day was. We watched shows and laughed. But after some time, he changed. Slowly. It wasn't sudden. He just stopped asking questions. He came home and went straight to the sofa. He turned on the TV and didn't speak. Sometimes I asked about his day, and he said, "It was fine." That was all. I told myself maybe he was tired from work. I tried to make things better. One night I cooked his favorite meal. I wore a dress I hadn't worn in months. When he came home, I smiled and said, "Dinner is ready." He looked at the table and said, "What's the occasion?" I said, "Nothing. I just wanted to do something nice." He sat down and said, "I'm not that hungry." I sat across from him and tried to eat, but I had no appetite left. That night, I cried in the bathroom. I didn't want him to hear me. The next morning I asked, "Is something wrong between us?" He didn't look at me. He said, "You think too much." That was all. I went to work that day with a heavy heart. At the shop, I smiled at customers, but inside, I was cold. I thought love was care, but he made me feel like I was the problem, like I was asking for too much. Weeks passed. I kept quiet. I didn't want to make him angry or push him away, but I also felt alone. I was in the same room with him, but it felt like I was invisible. One day I came home early. I had bought him a small gift, a new phone charger, because his old one was broken. I thought he would smile, but when I walked in, he didn't hear me. He was on a phone call, laughing. I stopped in the hallway and listened. He said, Don't worry. She never asks anything. My hands felt cold. I walked in. He looked at me and didn't look surprised. He just said, "You're home early." That night, he didn't tell me who he was talking to. He didn't try to explain. I asked, "Who was that?" And he said, "Just someone from work." Then he went to the kitchen. I stood there thinking, he didn't lie well. He didn't even try to care. That was worse than any answer he could have given. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. I remembered how I used to laugh more. I used to call my sister every other day. I used to bake on weekends and play music while cleaning. Now, I barely spoke. I went to work, came home, cooked, and stayed silent. I didn't listen to music anymore. I didn't call anyone. I thought love meant giving everything, but I gave too much. I gave and gave until I lost myself. The next week, I started to change, just a little. I didn't tell Ryan. I didn't do anything big. I just did one small thing each day that made me feel human again. I took a longer walk home. I smiled at people. I ate lunch in the park instead of at my desk. One day, a customer told me, "You helped me find the perfect dress." "Thank you." I smiled and said, "You're welcome." And I meant it. When I came home that day, Ryan looked at me and said, "You seem different." I said, "I'm tired of being sad." He looked confused, but said nothing. And that was okay. That night, I didn't ask him about his day. I made food just for myself. I listened to soft music while I ate. It wasn't loud. It wasn't a fight. But something inside me was waking up. I didn't leave him. I didn't pack my bags. I stayed. But I stopped waiting for him to see me. I started seeing myself again. I stopped trying to fix something that he didn't want to fix. I gave myself time. I didn't need to run. I just needed to breathe. I didn't know what would happen next. But I knew one thing. I didn't want to feel small anymore. I wanted to feel like myself again. The days went by, and I started to feel different. I still lived in the same house, and Ryan was still there. Nothing big had changed on the outside. But inside me, something had started to grow again. I was not smiling all the time, but I was thinking more clearly. I was not happy, but I was not as lost as before. One morning, I woke up before Ryan. I sat in the kitchen and made tea. The window was open. The street outside was quiet. I looked at the trees and listened to the sound of birds. I had not done that in a long time. I used to enjoy small things, like quiet mornings and hot tea. That day, I sat at the table and just breathed. I didn't need to speak. I just wanted peace. Ryan walked in. He looked at me and said, "Why are you up so early?" I said, "I just wanted to sit here for a while." He didn't say anything else. He took a cup, poured some tea, and sat down. We didn't speak. He looked at his phone. I looked at the sky. There was nothing to say. I didn't expect him to notice me anymore. At work, I tried harder to focus. I still helped customers at the shop. I still smiled when I could. One of the women I worked with asked me, "You look better these days. Is something good happening?" I said, "No, not really. I'm just trying to take care of myself." She smiled and said, "That's good. You should." That small talk meant a lot to me. It reminded me that I was still a person, not just someone sitting in a house with a man who did not see me. At home, Ryan stayed the same. He came in, took off his shoes, sat on the sofa, and turned on the TV. We ate in silence. I cleaned the plates. He didn't ask how I was. I didn't expect him to. But now, I didn't wait for his questions. I had stopped hoping for his words. That was the change. Before I share the rest of my story, I need to know, where are you listening from? Knowing someone hears me, understands me, gives me strength. One evening, I sat outside the house after work. I sat on the steps, just watching people walk by. It was cool outside. I wrapped my arms around myself. A little girl walked past me with her mother. She looked at me and smiled. I smiled back. It was just a second, but it made my chest feel warm. I missed that feeling, being seen, even for a moment. That night, Ryan came home late. He said, "Traffic was bad." I said, "Okay." He looked at me and said, "You don't care anymore, do you?" I looked at him and answered slowly, "I used to care too much." He frowned but didn't say anything. He went to the other room. I stayed in the kitchen and finished my tea. I didn't feel angry. I just felt calm. The next morning, I made eggs and toast. I placed one plate for myself and didn't make extra. Ryan walked in and asked, "No food for me?" I said, "You never asked." He rolled his eyes and walked out. But I didn't feel guilty. I had made food for him every day for years. That morning, I chose to make something just for me. Later that week, I started doing little things again. I went to the market alone and bought flowers. I placed them in a small glass by the window. They were yellow and bright. Ryan didn't say anything when he saw them, but I didn't care. I didn't do it for him. One Sunday, I cleaned the house and played music. I had not listened to music in a long time. I used to love it. I danced a little while cleaning. I smiled. I felt alive, even if just for 10 minutes. When Ryan walked in and saw me dancing, he looked confused. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Cleaning." He didn't say anything else. He left the room. I knew he didn't like to see me happy when he was not part of it, but I didn't stop. I kept the music on. I cleaned every room and sang as I moved. The house was the same. The man was the same. But I was not the same. That was enough for now. One night Ryan asked, "Are you going to stay like this? Cold and quiet?" I looked at him and said, I am not cold. I am just tired, he said. Tired of what? I looked at him and replied, tired of not being seen. Tired of giving and getting nothing. He laughed and said, You're being dramatic. I didn't reply. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. I didn't need to fight. I didn't need to shout. I was not there to prove anything. I had already lost too much time trying to be heard. Now, I just wanted peace. That night, I sat in bed and read a small book. It had been sitting on the shelf for months. I turned the pages slowly. It was a simple story, but I enjoyed it. I felt calm as I read. Ryan turned off the light and turned his back to me. I kept reading with the lamp on my side. The next few days were quiet. Ryan didn't speak much. He stayed in his room longer. He came home later. I didn't ask where he was. I didn't feel scared or jealous. I didn't care the way I used to. I had let go of that pain. One afternoon, after work, I passed a mirror in a shop window. I stopped and looked at myself. My face was still tired, but my eyes looked different. I stood up straight. I looked like someone who was trying, someone who was coming back to life. That evening, I made a simple dinner, just rice and vegetables. I ate alone. Ryan came home and looked at the food. He asked, "No dinner for two?" I said, "You can make your own if you like." He looked at me for a second, then said nothing. I had not become strong overnight. I still felt small sometimes, but I was learning to stand again, one quiet day at a time, and every small step, every little choice I made for myself helped me feel more like me. The days became easier, not happy, not perfect, just easier. I still lived in the same house. I still saw Ryan every day, but I was different now. I didn't wait for him. I didn't cry in silence. I made choices for myself. Small choices, quiet ones, but they helped me grow. One Saturday morning, I cleaned my room and opened the window. The air was fresh. I looked outside and saw the sun. I stood there for a few minutes. I felt calm. I didn't feel sad or scared. I just felt peaceful. That feeling was new to me. For a long time, I lived with fear. I always thought Ryan would change. I waited for love from someone who didn't know how to give it. But now I stopped waiting. Ryan came into the kitchen while I was making breakfast. He looked tired. He said, "Are you going somewhere today?" I said, "No, just staying home." He looked around and said, "You've been acting strange these days." I said nothing. I took my tea and walked to the living room. He didn't understand what was happening, but I did. I had stopped giving him all of me. I didn't ask about his day anymore. I didn't wait for his smile or his voice. I just lived. And that was enough for now. At work, I spoke more with customers. I helped a woman find a jacket. She said, "You are very kind." That made me smile. I used to feel too small to be seen. Now, I was seen. Even if only for a moment, it still mattered. One day, Ryan didn't come home until very late. I heard the door open after midnight. He walked in, looked at me, and said, "Still awake?" I said, "Yes." He asked, "Why are you always so calm now?" I looked at him and said, "Because I stopped trying to make you love me." He looked away. He didn't speak. He walked to the bedroom and closed the door. The next morning, I woke up early and left for work. I didn't leave a note. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't feel the need to explain. When I came back home, the house was quiet. Ryan was on the sofa. He didn't look at me. I walked past him, placed my bag on the chair, and sat at the table with my cup of tea. He finally spoke. "So, is this what we are now?" I looked at him and asked, "What do you mean?" He said, "You don't care about this anymore." I said, "I cared for a long time. I gave everything. I lost myself. Now I am learning to be myself again." He didn't reply. For the next few weeks, we lived like that. He did what he wanted. I did what I needed to feel strong. I didn't try to fix anything. I didn't start fights. But I didn't stay quiet either. If something made me sad or upset, I said it. Not to hurt him, but to speak for myself. My voice was soft, but it was mine. Then, one day, Ryan sat across from me and said, "I don't know who you are anymore." I looked at him and replied, "I'm someone who learned to stop waiting for love from the wrong person." He looked down. He stayed quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You were always too good for me." That was the first time he said something true. He didn't ask me to stay. He didn't say sorry, but I didn't need that anymore. I had already made my decision. I didn't want to live like that for the rest of my life. I wanted to wake up and feel free. I wanted to smile without fear. I wanted to be me again. 1 week later, I packed my things. Just the basics. Some clothes, some books, and a few small things that made me feel safe. Ryan watched me but didn't say a word. When I was done, I stood near the door and looked at him. I said, "I hope you learn to love better one day, but I won't wait for that." He didn't answer. He just looked at the floor. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. I felt a soft wind on my face. The street was quiet. I stood there for a moment and breathed in. For the first time in a long time, I felt light. Not because I had someone, not because someone chose me, but because I chose myself. I moved into a small room not far from work. It was quiet, clean, and mine. I cooked simple food. I played music while I cleaned. I read books again. I made tea every morning. I talked to my sister on the phone. She asked me, "Are you okay now?" I said, "I'm not perfect, but I'm getting better." That was true. I didn't hate Ryan. I didn't feel anger anymore. I just knew I could not stay small for someone who didn't see my worth. I had been kind. I had been patient. But I had also been forgotten in my own life. Now, I was learning to remember who I was. Some nights were still quiet. Some mornings were still hard. But I kept going, step by step. One small good thing each day. I was not looking for love. I was looking for peace. And I was finding it slowly in the sound of the morning wind, the first sip of warm tea, and the strength of my own voice. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and share. More emotional and inspiring stories are coming soon.